Yeah, on record, Tshidi.
We came to this era of coalitions unprepared. We do not have a political perspective, an adopted national political perspective about what kind of coalitions must we enter into, what is the character of the parties or organizations that can actually form, on what basis who do we coalesce with, and what is a common agenda between us and them, which must unite us to work together.
Hello, welcome to Politricking with Tshidi Madia. My name is Tshidi Madia. This is episode 8 of season 2 of a politics podcast brought to you by Eyewitness News. The ANC is now just weeks away from its national conference. We are continuing to bring you conversations with leaders in the party. What needs to happen next? Where must the ANC go? Who should lead the ANC into the future? This week, the party's electoral committee announced top contenders for the various official roles. So they're looking at the top 6 and the names that have made the cut as far as nominations are concerned. As expected, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and Zweli Mkhize will go head to head. The margins between those two are quite wild. So Ramaphosa has over 2,000 nominations. Zweli Mkhize has 900 odd nominations. Then for Deputy President, again, as expected, Paul Mashatile leads that race. You've got Oscar Mabuyane and Ronald Lamola making the cut. A lot of women who put their hands up for that position, as well as President, have not made the cut at all. For Secretary General, and I think this is an interesting one, because that's from Mdumiseni. Our guest this week, Mdumiseni Ntuli's name comes up quite fiercely. Mdumiseni Ntuli is leading the pack. The man who did not get endorsed by his home province, that's KZN. The man who had people working towards his nomination across many provinces. You know, a lot of young people, including a lot of Ramaphosa young people, saying that that's who they want, as opposed to Fikile Mbalula. But he's on the ballot, Mdumiseni. So is Phumulo Masualle from the Eastern Cape. So is Fikile Mbalula. He's training right there, but he's there. And then for Deputy Secretary General, I always think this is a problem. They have got 2 women, Phoebe Potgieter versus Nomvula Mokonyane. Nomvula's leading in that particular race. My issue there is this the only place where the ANC considers women? Because that for me is a travesty. For a party that speaks so highly about its commitment to progression as far as gender roles are concerned, as much as it speaks of gender parity, the fact that this keeps happening is a blot on the ANC's legacy, as far as I'm concerned. And then as far as the position of Treasurer General, and it's an interesting one. So Bejani Chauke is leading. You've got Pule Mabe and Mzwandile Masina. Now, my bet, Pule Mabe and Mzwandile Masina, if they combine their numbers, Bejani is out. And if they combine their numbers, including the numbers that did not make the cut for an Andy Lungisa or even a Ronald, all those things, let's pick those numbers up. You'll probably see Pule Mabe becoming the ANC's next Treasurer General. A difficult position considering the issue around staffers, right? The fact that they've gone on for months on end without payments of salaries. The last position that they dealt with is that of National Chair. The people who made the cut, 3 names: Stan Matabata, Chupu from Limpopo. We expected to see Matabata there. Gwede Mantashe, who's the outgoing, and as he says, outgoing but incoming. And then David Masondo, an interesting name, much younger than the other 2. A lot of people had written him off, but he's on the ballot now. So if you are trying to agitate to change the ANC, there are interesting names. But somebody was saying to me earlier, looking at those who are leading in nominations, if that's what the ANC actually produces, it'll be interesting. With Ntuli, it goes back to the days where it had people running the Secretariat who were in their 30s, right? He wouldn't have been the first. Even the incumbent, in terms of the president of the organization, was actually Secretary General at the time. And maybe it'll take it back to the stature it once had. And a lot of the criticism is that office that is so key to ANC life has been eroded in so many ways. That's the heart of the conversation we're going to have this week, because, as I said earlier, the person we're speaking to is Mdumiseni Ntuli. But I can't get into the podcast without speaking about this particular development. We also saw the Constitutional Court ordering for Janus Walus to be released on parole. This is a difficult one. Why? This Polish man, who together with Clive Derby Lewis, took something so precious from us as a people. It is also correct to say the pair who assassinated Chris Hani, then General Secretary of the SACP and Chief of Staff of the ANC's armed wing, Umkhonto Wesizwe. That decision, that moment, that action almost plunged this country into civil war. Derby Lewis was released in 2015. He died shortly afterwards. The anger that remains around this pair is rooted in the belief that they've shown no remorse and have not been honest about what made them go to Hani's Don Park home and pump his body with bullets, taking his life. We don't have a full understanding still of what the motivation was behind that, who they worked with, because the general belief is that they've not been truly honest, that these are despicable human beings who tried to set us on the wrong path when we were searching for a democratic South Africa. There is an argument that can also be made that that moment, under the guidance of a former president, Nelson Mandela, was handled so well that we moved towards transition instead of civil war. But the pain of that period, the pain of what they took away, was absolutely felt with every word uttered by Medimpo Hani this week.
I don't really give a shit because this court has not even addressed the victims. I don't exist. He is busy giving us a lecture about a Polish man who came to South Africa to kill my husband. Do you understand how I feel? Now he tells me everybody is equal in South Africa. So as far as Zondo and Co., they are corporate, whatever they call, close corporation in our border, constitutional court. I don't know why it's called constitutional court. This is dictatorship at the highest. This country is finished. As long as we have this court led by Zondo and this club of his, we are done. We should forget about this country.
Her anger, her heartbreak, her many years of carrying that pain all came to fore when journalists asked her for a reaction following the judgment. Some have argued that she could have used a moment. But that's the thing about emotions. They are raw, more so a situation like this. My 5 cents take on it? The law must be clinical. It can't have eyes. It must look at what's presented before it and navigate from that perspective, even if it's the devil before it. And in this case, I'd want to argue that's exactly what that was. I think the alliance must also recognize that as you point a finger at the courts, because you've had a lot of utterances from leaders, the 3 point right back at you. And that's where my issue lies is, what have they done to honor Hani's memory? Beyond the annual commemorations, how have they stayed true to who he was and what his beliefs were? His socialist views, his love for his people. Can they honestly look at themselves as alliance members, as members of the ANC, which is yet to release a statement on yesterday's outcome? Because that's a moment where you recognize your pain. You can say you feel it's unjust still, but you also then affirm the courts of this country. It couldn't even do that. A fine balancing act. In that moment, it couldn't do that. So then I ask, can these people honestly look at themselves and say, we've done our bit to honor Comrade Hani? Hani in October 1992 said, "What I fear is that the liberators emerge as elitists who drive around in Mercedes-Benz and use the resources of this country to live in palaces and to gather riches." Again, I ask, have they lived up to who he was, his teachings, his legacies? Anyway, back to the nominations. Mdumiseni Ntuli, as I said earlier, is in the hot seat this week. Here are his thoughts on the many people who are calling for him to become the next Secretary General of the ANC, and those who say he's simply too inexperienced for the job. I suppose the nominations say otherwise, nah? Take a listen. So we're continuing in the vein that I've been talking about over the past few weeks. We are talking to ANC leaders. That conference is now, less than 25 days away, where the ANC will elect new leaders that take the party forward. That new leadership needs to speak to the issues you and I complain about every day. The state of the country. We complain about electricity. I'm recording this during load shedding. We talk about the issues around water, the issues around just the dearth of leadership that we are seeing in and around the governing party. So today I'm interviewing Mdumiseni Ntuli, former Provincial Secretary of the ANC in Kwazulu-Natal, somebody who had been dubbed a dark horse, somebody who I think I maybe at some points of this process, this journey, wrote off here and there, because, in politics, you can't write anybody off. Mdu, hi, welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tshidi. Thanks for having us, and really we appreciate to be here. Thanks.
Some of us had written you off, saying, hey, if there's no slate attaching itself to you, Mdu might as well be out in the wilderness. Were you surprised that that's the assessment people made of you? Are you surprised by the numbers that you're seeing of branches saying, actually, Mdu is perfectly what we're looking for in the Secretariat?
No. I'm not necessarily surprised. You see, I've been part of the ANC leadership at the provincial level for the past 7 years, and during that period, serving both as a provincial spokesperson and later on a provincial secretary of the organization, I had an opportunity to interact with a number of comrades, directly or indirectly through the media, who were following our work in the province, the way in which we're exercising leadership, and how we dealt with a number of challenges that emerged during our era as the provincial leadership. So I had a sense that many people, messages that I would receive personally or through my comrades, that there was a widespread, reception of our leadership style and the way in which we've been handling challenges facing the African National Congress. So when the nomination began, I sort of had a sense that a number of comrades would feel comfortable to choose me as one of the leaders that should be considered for senior responsibilities in the organization.
Talk to me about that period of being in charge of a province like KwaZulu-Natal. KZN has a lot of, I don't want to call them issues, let's call them challenges, for the lack of a better word. And across multiple sectors of society, there are tensions in KZN at all times. What was it like navigating that space? And I also say this to you, having seen your organizational report, having seen the dilemma that you felt you faced as far as the Zuma crisis. This is now in relation to former President Jacob Zuma's jailing, and the lack of support I think you felt you did not find at national level.
It was a very complex period. You recall that we were elected, I think about 6-7 months after the national conference, the then 2017 NASREC, National Conference of the ANC. And of course, at the back of our election as a leadership of the province was also hardly 3-4 months after the National Executive Committee had taken a decision to recall President Zuma, and charges were subsequently reinstated against him. So you are coming from a national conference that was hotly contested. As a province, we came back from that conference without any of our leaders whose names were being discussed, being elected into the leadership. But we also came back in an environment where we ourselves were very divided in the province because of the two views that we had towards the national conference, what used to be called the CR17 and the NTZ group. So we had to deal with those challenges. So we are elected in an environment where those challenges are still very much pronounced, very much with us. And we had to find a way to unite the organization because we understood then that unless we do something about the unit of the organization and be practical about it, it was almost inevitable that the ANC was going to lose elections in KwaZulu-Natal.
I want to go back. I want to pick at different things. I want to first pick at the issue of former President Jacob Zuma. As it stands, he's possibly going back to jail as per the Supreme Court of Appeal's outcomes this week. He might fight that further. We've seen that before. It's not surprising. What are your concerns as a former leader of that province when you're hearing about the possibility of Zuma going back to jail? Do you get worried at all about how things will unfold? Do you foresee anything similar to that unrest that shook South Africa's democracy in 2021?
Well, let's rather say as a former provincial secretary, because I'm still part of the provincial executive committee. I think, all of us today were following the developments in the Supreme Court of Appeal, the judgment that was handed down. I'm quite certain that the provincial leadership of the ANC, in this case I'm referring to the top 5, which meets every Monday, would naturally have to look at that judgment and then guide the rest of us in terms of how we should proceed to handle that situation. It would be premature for me to really have and considered opinion or view about what may be or may not be my fears with regard to the judgment. I think personally, I've also not seen the judgment itself. I heard about it on the news. But secondly, I know that my leadership will study that judgment properly and guide the organization in terms of how we should respond to it.
Are you not worried that there's already tensions between the current leadership, the top 5, and the former president? And I articulate this based on statements he also put out in the lead up to the nomination process, where he seemed to express a lack of confidence in the current leadership. So if he had doubts about the cohort you led with, he seems to have maintained those, even worse now, with the Mdumiseni Ntuli and the Mtolos who are now in charge.
No, I don't think that what happened when President Zuma issued a statement communicating his own preferences about the national leadership of the ANC was then a sign that he was demonstrating his unhappiness or tension with the provincial leadership of the ANC. I mean, it's expected that each one of us will have different views about who should lead the African National Congress, and I don't think that we should therefore exonerate or insulate President Zuma from having an opinion. My own view is that he expressed a view which essentially is contrary to the position we adopted as a provincial executive committee. But all of us, the PEC and him, were speaking at the time when branches were still going to undergo the process of PGMs to select their preferred leadership choices. So I have not seen it as a tension of any form. I think we hold different views, which is natural when we prepare for a conference of this magnitude. And I think as we move along the way, we'll find a way to synergize our ideas and have a common approach. So
the observation of the tensions is just us as outsiders?
I don't think it's really, a tension per se. It's an existence of two different views, which is inherent. I'm saying in the ANC.
It's allowed. It's absolutely allowed.
Yeah, it's inherent. And it's a healthy way, actually, to strengthen the organization. The problem only emerges when the views are becoming antagonistic. But when it's just the differences about what direction we should take, what choice of leadership must be considered, I think it's a matter that we should actually encourage.
Based on your learned experience, how should the NEC handle this matter? And I say this again as somebody who penned the organizational report that pretty much said you were left in the lurch by the officials and the national leadership of the ANC.
Well, I think, of course, all of us, there are lessons that have been learned or must have been learned by all of us, given the situation we had to deal with last year, which resulted in the incarceration of former President Zuma. I'm quite certain that both the provincial officials of the ANC and the headquarters of the ANC should find a way to reflect on the implications of this judgment, the consequences that it might have on the ground, and how should the ANC as an organization exercise leadership to ensure that we do not in any way gravitate to the experience that we went through in July 2021. I think the leadership is quite capable to deal with those matters. I think they would be worried about how will the population respond to this, and so then appropriate actions will have to be taken. In my view, in an environment that is much better than we had in July last year, because we are no longer having COVID-19, which restrain engagement with structures of the organization and different sectors of society. So we're in a better position now to respond and do so effectively.
In 2017, the ANC in KZN was dubbed the biggest loser of that conference, had no representation in the top officials, the largest province in the ANC, home to the largest region in the ANC. What do you foresee for the ANC in KZN this time around?
No, it won't happen this time around. There will certainly be one, if not more than one, of our comrades from KwaZulu-Natal who are going to be part of the top 6 of the organization. The situation has changed quite radically. If you, in 2017, for instance, there was this higher concentration on the politics of slates, which has sort of been diminished since that period. And I think
I don't fully agree with that, but okay.
Of course, we'll discuss that. And of course, I'm saying now, that is why you would have you have a possibility now that quite a few of the comrades who will be elected in the top 6 will be chosen on the basis of their capabilities rather than with whom they are associated with leading to the conference.
I think you might have said something along these lines to the Sunday Times, if I'm correct. You might be the unlikely person who represents KZN in the top 6. Am I reading that correctly?
No, I never said that in the Sunday Times.
Okay, maybe you didn't say it to the newspapers.
No,
but it's definitely an assumption that's being made far and wide.
Implied.
That
sure
you might be the person who they did not pick, did not want to back, who salvages KZN's prospects going forward.
It's possible. I mean, the reason why I would say it's possible is because judging by the nominations that have taken place, you might very well be aware that my name has essentially resonated with a majority of provinces, and I think also probably a majority of branches in the country.
He says that with a smile, so he knows. That's what's up. Yeah,
I do think that there's a great possibility if these nominations are anything to go by, it's almost inevitable that one will have an opportunity to be part of the newly elected leadership at the end of December this year.
Do you trust the picture that you're seeing is based on the nominations? I find it hard to believe that politicians will trust one another, especially based on how 2017 unfolded. Do you trust the picture that you're seeing unfolding?
I do. I trust it very much. Hey, look, we are interacting with comrades in different parts of the country, including in my own province. So we sort of had a sense, even before PGM started, what's the possible outcome that one should anticipate. The fact that, for instance, my name became the most supported name in the Mpumalanga province was essentially something I expected. The reason why I expected it is because I knew that all structures of the ANC in Mpumalanga that are supporting President Ramaphosa to come back supports him with me as a SG. Equally, those that support Comrade Mabuza to become the president, they do so with myself as the SG. So it was given that therefore the outcome of that nomination will have my name as a leading candidate, not just for the position of the SG, but as the highest nominated person from that province. That if you that's what had happened. So I'm saying I think we have no reason to be doubtful about what has happened, because it's an outcome that we anticipated given what has been happening.
Have you had conversations with the rest of your provincial executive committee, the top 5? Actually, let me just focus on the officials in your own province that did not back you. Have they come back to you saying, actually, look, the picture's different, it's not what we expected? Have they said anything to you about working together better towards December?
I've had a meeting with the provincial officials before this outcome. I was in the by-election campaign with the Provincial Secretary, Comrade Ebegi Mdolo. Throughout the day, we met from 9 o'clock in the morning. Of course, we were going to different houses, but we were together for the rest of the day until in the afternoon. Just before we finished the campaign, we had a moment for about 10-20 minutes, giving some analysis about what is happening currently in the nomination processes. And how should we, as KZN, seize this moment and act in a way that is going to consolidate the unit of the African National Congress at home. So I'm happy that we had that preliminary discussion. We didn't make there was no expectation anywhere for decisions to be made. But the fact that both of us are concerned about the size of our province and that it must then unite itself in order to play a meaningful role in the national politics, I think I was very happy about that. So I'm quite certain that in his meeting with the provincial officials today, in one form or another, that kind of a conversation will also surface, because we are all genuinely concerned about the direction of the ANC and the role of the biggest province of the ANC in terms of shaping the direction of the movement as a whole.
I want to speak a little bit about that issue that you just touched on now, the direction of the ANC. I was listening to a few of your stalwarts, including Mac Maharaj, and Mac kept saying to me, the ANC has to come out of Nasrec with practical steps about addressing issues that are affecting the country, issues that affect, corruption, service delivery in the country. Says it cannot be about personalities. What is your observation about the conversations you are having with your comrades? Is the issue with us in the media? Are we obsessed with who you pick to be leaders, who you're working with? Or is it also just actually how the ANC is at the moment, where the focus are not issues that you have to deal with, you have to address, but actually who gets to be where as far as resources are concerned and who gets to lead the party? I'm going to ask you later about the generational battle, because I think that's why Mbalula could not get your name out of his mouth. Yeah. That speaks to generational jealousy or whatever issues you want to call them. Yeah. I first want to speak about where do you think the ANC's head is in conversations generally around this conference?
Look, I think what seems to be dominating the headlines or the national discourse is the choice of leadership rather than the policy orientation and the content of what must come out of Nasrec, which of course is unfortunate in a sense that it denies the population of South Africa a deeper understanding of what the ANC, what conversation is taking place in the ANC, for instance, about the economy, and what conversation is taking place in the ANC about how to rebuild and reposition the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, including the ESCOM that you and I were talking about earlier on. So I think what catches the headline is unfortunately about who's going to lead rather than to lead us to which direction. There's quite a substantive conversation that has taken place in the policy conference about the state of the organization, the state of governance, the functionality of many municipalities led by the ANC, and how should we respond to the challenges posed by the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, and how to rebuild the economy, which, as you know, has not only it has gone worse now with the COVID-19, but that conversation has not really come out to the public domain for people to interact with the ideas that the ANC is putting on the table, largely because all the time when the ANC is going to elections, its own conferences, people get preoccupied with who's going to lead, because that discussion is also associated with the potential leadership that is going to ascend to government.
Absolutely.
And so it happened that people will obviously be concerned about that, because if you know there's a governing party and its outcome in terms of leadership has a potential to give you your next president, you are bound to be concerned about what's happening around that level. And unfortunately, that at times overshadows the real conversation about the policy direction that we should be pursuing.
In Gauteng, we talk quite often about how the ANC is holding on to this province by a shoestring. But in reality, both Gauteng and KZN could actually go in the next general elections. What are your thoughts around solutions? How do you mitigate that? And especially if you're elected into national office, because then the preoccupation can't be just about KZN. It has to be a holistic picture that you look at. And your approach to coalitions. Where does Mdu stand? There are some who believe the EFF should be a party the ANC can have conversations with. The leadership, the people in the ANC relate to. There are those who believe it's a no-go zone. You're hearing the DA saying, actually, we'd like to be able to have conversations with the ANC. We've worked with the ANC back in the day in the Western Cape. What are your thoughts?
You see, the first thing that we need to do immediately when we emerge from conference, when I'm saying the first thing, this will be something that has to happen within the next 3 months after the leadership has been elected, is to deal with internal conflicts and tensions within structures of the ANC and among comrades. Because what is costing the ANC so badly in the election is our own internal challenges. Of course, the objective reality about the economy that is not performing optimally, it has impact on the way in which the population receives and deal with the ANC. But the major part of the challenge we need to confront and resolve is to address perennial problems of divisions, tensions and conflict.
But you've been doing it for so many years, Mdu.
We've got
the
to
ANC's been
doing
stuck, resolving itself as the country
Sure.
falls apart.
No, we've got to, but you see, when the ANC falls apart, when the ANC is wriggled by a lot of problems and tension, it transferred that problem to the population.
Yeah, you're killing us along with yourselves.
That is why we need to deal with the internal
You're kamikaze
problems.
pilots,
We
the
need
ANC at the moment.
We need to deal with the problems in the African National Congress. And in many instances, we've been dealing with those problems successfully in certain parts of at least the province where I come from, which is why we've managed to secure the victory in the municipalities where the ANC is still governing. It's a challenge that we need to remain seized with. We can't give up because there's no way you can deal with problems of South Africa unless you have a machinery that is properly oiled and positioned to deal with those challenges. The matter about the coalition, let me tell you what has been the challenge in the organization. We came to this era of coalitions unprepared. We do not have a political perspective, an adopted national political perspective about what kind of coalitions must we enter into, what is the character of the parties or organizations that can actually form, on what basis who do we coalesce with, and what is a common agenda between us and them, which must unite us to work together.
I like that, because here's a party that says to South Africans every day, we gave you freedom, celebrate our contributions to your freedom. Yet, the same party, and it celebrates the constitution along with that, the same party oversees a constitution that actually says this country is designed for power sharing. But Here you are saying to me, actually, you're ill prepared for the concept of power sharing, but we must laud you for ushering freedom. But you have not done the homework to help us navigate the waters that we are in now. Help us then understand as citizens, what sort of an ANC must then emerge when you can't do the basics. For me, if this was in the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
And even you can go further. You can actually go to the Freedom Charter because, all shall share. So if all of those things were there, why is our governing party so ill-prepared still? And this is now your own admission that the ANC is actually ill-prepared for this chapter that it should oversee.
I'll explain that because, you see, the ANC has been and remain by far the most dominant political formation in this country.
Sure, comfortable.
Governing many parts of this country. Many of us, and I think this is a view that will be shared by many comrades within the organization, never really expected what happened in November last year, where there would be such a decline of support to the African National Congress.
How? To
the point that we may then end up having to focus on the politics of coalition as the main core politics of that the organization has to pursue.
Help me understand how. Hold on. Because every point you bring up, I've got problems with. Because how are you not prepared for 2021 when we are 2016?
Yes, we're 2016, but between 2016 and 2021, we're 2019. Many of you in the media had said the ANC was going to lose in 2019, and yet it did not.
Also, the 2019,
the point I'm emphasizing,
the shoelace that you held on to Gauteng with, that you held on to KZN with, made you feel comfortable enough to then forget that coalitions were a factor.
In KZN, we're not hanging on.
You're not the shoelace that is Gauteng.
No, not.
But you're on a slippery slope.
The point I'm making is that, look, we're a political organization. Whenever we enter into relationships or to any kind of a partnership or coalitions, as you are calling them, we've got to enter them on the basis of the political perspective, which must then say who can we work with and who can we not work with and why. Now, I'm saying to you, the ANC has not yet produced a discussion document or a perspective that must guide this coalition discussion and coalition talks. What has been happening now is people deciding that in this area, in this locality, it's better we can work with these ones, we can't work with this. It's more about personalities rather than a strategic partnership, which must be established between the ANC as a dominant party in almost all municipalities with whoever that wants to work with the ANC to govern that area, that municipality.
I think 55% is still a shoestring. But anyway, the Secretariat is an important office of the ANC.
Yeah.
I think Mbalula made an argument. Fikile Mbalula, of course, is one of the other names that's hoping to contest for this position. Fikile Mbalula made an argument that it's lost its stature. And I couldn't help but agree with that. There was a period where even journalists wanted to hear what comes out of the Secretariat of the ANC and expected it to be a coherent message about whatever issue was plaguing the organization or the country. We've kind of seen that glimmer fall away over the years. What is your vision? What is your vision then for that office? Should you occupy it? Should you be elected into it?
You see, there are a number of things that we need to do in to reposition and rebuild the headquarters of the ANC, particularly what we call the SGO. My own view, which is a view that I think is now shared by the majority of us in the ANC, that office needs to have two comrades who occupy what I call the two DSGs. A DSG that must be responsible for organizational campaigns, organizational building, a DSG that must help us effectively to reconnect with what we call the motive forces of the NTR and various sectors of society, and build a campaigning ANC. I'm not here talking about a mobilizing ANC. I mean an ANC that conceptualizes a campaign that resonates with our people in different parts of the country and lead the population behind that particular campaign. But on the other side, we need a DSG that is going to build the capacity of the organization to formulate policies, to evaluate, to monitor the implementation, to build the capacity of the ANC to conduct effective research and produce ideas. The ANC has always been known as an organization of thought leaders.
Yes,
and that was not by accident. It was designed. It's because it was structured in such a way that made it possible for such leaders to be produced by the organization. So my own view is that that second TSG, part of what that comrade will have to focus on is to create systems that will produce that kind of leadership, which will then help us to ensure that the ANC governs better and effectively in the rest of the country. So the head office and the SGO lost that stature you were talking about, primarily because, in my view, it is not positioned in a manner that would make it possible for it to discharge that kind of responsibility. That is why when you go to this conference, we need to deal with the organizational architecture of the ANC, particularly at the center where the SG of the ANC is located.
The issue of two DSG speaks obviously to the constitutional amendments that need to happen before the conference fully gets underway. What other amendments do you reckon the ANC needs to reconcile with before getting into conference? So expand the top officials and?
My view is that the top 6 should be expanded to the top 7 to accommodate this eventuality of 2 DSGs and the responsibilities that I've outlined. But I also think that we need a very, very measured conversation to redefine the role of the ANC Veterans League. Personally, I don't think the ANC Veterans League must function in the same way as the ANC Youth League and the ANC Women's League. And to the extent that even as we go to conferences, they could meet and decide who they prefer and who they do not prefer. I think the veterans of the movement must be seen and be accepted by all and sundry within the ANC as our leaders, whose voice and whose views, when they guide us in the course of our work, are not in any way contaminated by the position they may have adopted leading to a conference of the ANC. I don't think that in the current situation is helping the ANC to really to treat the Veterans League in the same way that we are treating the Youth League and the ANC Women's League. I don't know whether this view will be supported by the majority of comrades in conference, but my own view is that we need to revisit that because we may have done this 5-6 years ago, but I think the new situation demands that we position the veterans differently from the way in which they are.
So they must be removed from the murky waters.
My own view is that you need to amend the ANC constitution to redefine their own status, slightly different from the rest of the leagues, because there can't be a lobby group. You can't have the ANC stalwarts and veterans being seen as part of the lobby group when the ANC is going to a conference, because what if the ones who are elected are not the ones that they had favored? Would they be able to provide the wise counsel, share their wisdom and guidance in a way that would be seen by everybody as an objective exercise? Or it may be seen as a subjective intervention, given the fact that they may have not preferred a particular leader to be elected. So I think those are some of the things, in my view, we need to revisit as part of our work as we go to this conference.
You know, some make an argument, I said to you, about age. You know, what I found interesting about Mbadula in our conversation, that he did not mention Phumulo Masualle, who's another contender for Secretary General. He offered unprovoked, unwanted, unrequested information about your campaign. Some parts I absolutely agreed with. I do think that there was a PR campaign that was playing itself out in the media. He then says, you are working with people. You weren't working alone. I'm not even interested in your argument for or against that. I know what I know, and I know what I understand as well. Hence, I agreed with Mbalula's views. However, what I want to know from you is, do you see yourself as that threat where somebody like Mbalula might think because that they were in leadership before you, generationally speaking, they would be more deserving? Do you feel that kind of tension? Because I've also seen it around the issue of Treasurer General, for instance, where a Pule Mabe versus an Andy Lungisa versus a Mzwandile Masina, close comrades were at odds, and in part it's because, but I led longer. Do you see that? Do you see Mbalula's views as being anything along those lines?
There's no requirement like that in the ANC. That
you must wait your turn.
Because the ANC has always selected leadership across generations. There's no requirement that these ones can't lead unless these ones have led. Because in each generation, there must be a leadership that is chosen on the basis of their suitability for the work and on the basis of their capability at the given moment of the struggle to build a better life for all. So I don't think that there would be a moment where we would stop and say, wait now, we must allow this generation first to finish before we go to the next generation. But I do want to make a comment on the view that you and Mbalula hold, which you share, unfortunately.
Which one?
This view that says...
That you play it as media.
Yeah, that view that says that...
you can make a comment. I'm going to disagree with it. No, let me not preempt it.
Yeah, but...
Make your comment. Maybe I'll agree with you too.
Yeah, let me make this comment because, Tshidi, slates are not invisible. But you and Mbalula seems to be concocting something new now to say that... No, we know everybody belongs to the slates. But the fact of the matter is that there are no invisible slates. When you are in the slate is known, is visible, is punted in the media and social, and there are people who are behind the slate who are punting it. Now, I've been listening to this, very, very strange argument that says, no, we know him, he belonged to... So it sounded like you and him separately or together sit somewhere where you have a sense that you have this kind of information that I belong to a particular slate, and definitely this thing that I'm saying that we're defeating the slate with this campaign, with what is happening to us, this conference, is really just a figment of my own imagination. But
not just yours, you and the electoral committee.
But neither you nor him have been able to say, here we mean when we say everybody belongs to the slate.
Can I just say this, ne?
I'm prepared to listen.
Gauteng loves Mdumiseni Ntuli. Read into that whatever you may. I'm going to leave it at that. I want to move away. I've given you an answer.
No, I'm
take it or don't take it.
I'm liked by a number of provinces, not just Gauteng. Why are you singling them out? I'm liked by Limpopo.
But I'm singling them out to answer you. I'm answering your question by singling out Gauteng. Why would I single out Gauteng if I'm not answering your question? I'm responding to you. You said, why? So I'm saying to you, Gauteng really loves Mdumiseni Ntuli.
But you can't say Gauteng is a slate. It's a province.
I didn't say Gauteng is a slate. I said Gauteng really loves Mdumiseni Ntuli. And I'm going to leave it at that. Some people speak about your experience. Sure. You come from the student movement. Yeah. You said for 7 years, right, in the province of KZN. You had a term as Provincial Secretary, which you couldn't retain when we went to conference in July. So some people also use that as a question of experience. Let me get your first response to those who want to use experience as a marker as to why you don't deserve to be in the Secretariat. It's not Mbalula, it's just people.
Well, whoever it is, I don't know what do they mean by experience. Many people do not know that I was a national organizer of the ANC for almost a decade, for more than 9 years actually, which means that I was in the SGO of the ANC, and not just an administrator, but an organizer, someone that was assigned a responsibility to contribute in the rebuilding and strengthening of the African National Congress throughout the country. So when people say you need an experience, I don't know what do they mean. And then after that, of course, and I was doing that work while simultaneously being a member of the Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC Youth League in Kwazulu-Natal. And later on, I graduated to become a member of the PEC of the ANC. And of course, as a Provincial Secretary. So I don't know. Those who are saying I don't have experience, I don't know what is meant by experience, because there are many comrades, for instance, I can give you an example, who are serving in the National Executive Committee of the ANC today, that have never had an opportunity to serve in provincial executive committees of the ANC, let alone being an official of the ANC and a secretary for that matter, who's a custodian of the organization and runs the party on a day-to-day basis. So when people say we don't have an experience, I'm yet to hear someone who can explain and provide some cogent reasons what is meant by that.
Defining experience. There's also an argument, and I think you kind of poked into it a little bit now, with the people who serve the NEC but don't know what it's like to serve provinces.
Yeah.
My observations, and maybe your 9 years in organizing might take away from my argument, but my experience watching people like Ace Magashule is that provincial leaders who've led provinces for a really long time actually struggle to adapt to the national dynamics. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that it might be difficult for you, or the fact that you were there for 9 years, however long ago, you are good to go, you were able to grasp and move beyond the politics?
For that matter, it's not like that long. I was there between 2007 and 2016. So that's not that long.
So you're fresh. That's what you're making.
Not that long. And then I went home and served in the PEC. This is my 7th year now in the PEC. You see the difference as well between, I think, myself and other comrades that you may have referred to. I was a secretary. So being a chair and being a secretary are quite two different things in the ANC. If you are a chair, you spend more time in government. You have less to do with the party and the party work and the systems and operations of the party. If you are a provincial secretary, you are doing the similar work as that of the SG,
sure,
but at a slightly
smaller scale. So
that is what, in my view, I think comes handy for some of us who have served as provincial secretaries of the ANC, and not so long ago, recently as now. So we've been part of the organization, the administration of the organization over the past few years, and I think that should be an advantage if ever one occupies the position of the SG.
And yet, some will still make an argument that they didn't feel you were successful as secretary of the ANC in KZN.
They would be, of course, they would be entitled to say that. Sure. I would, to some extent, I would agree, but I would disagree as well. And I will explain this. I would agree that because we did not succeed to win elections overwhelmingly throughout the country, and particularly in KZN, some people might say that we did not win the election. It means that was a failure on your part as part of the provincial leadership. But on the other side, somebody would also say, including myself, that what were the conditions that we find ourselves as the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal and the ANC in general? I can tell you, Tshidi, there's never been a leadership in KwaZulu-Natal, and I doubt there will be any in the nearest future or during our lifetime, that will have to deal with major challenges so unprecedented as we had to deal with in the province. The challenges that we are familiar with, what was happening in the Shembe Church, what was happening in the Royal House, and of course this unprecedented unrest that happened in July. I think nobody, from Ndebele, from Zuma when he was president, up to, when he was chair of the province, and up to Senzo Mkhunu when he was chair, nobody has ever had to deal with so much complex and difficult challenges in KwaZulu-Natal as I've had to deal with. My own view is that therefore counts. If you want to weigh into the debate about the quality of leadership, you'll also have to measure that quality within a context, not in an abstract way. Because if you do it in an abstract way, the results may not really be what it's supposed to be.
I'm almost done. What is it about Sihle Zikalala that your own province didn't understand? We read, obviously, the conference as a massive snub. He was up for re-election. I'd like to imagine that Sihle Zikalala was somebody who tried hard.
He was.
Similarly to you.
Yeah, I
to deliver.
Know. Look, he was. I think it's unfortunate that we lost his experience, both as a chair, but equally as an ordinary member of the PEC at least, because I can tell you, all of us who are in that PEC are far more experienced and capable than him in terms of party work and having been into the party. Why that he could not come back, including in the PEC, is something that has been very difficult for us to really think about.
But you're all far more experienced, you said.
No, I'm saying he is far more experienced than all of us in that leadership. He has been in the organization ahead of I think almost all of us, maybe there may be one or two comrades in that PEC who can claim that Sihle found. The rest of us there, we joined the organization and we became active and started being part of the leadership far behind comrades. So his experience and his knowledge of the party, I don't know how delegates missed that up when they were deciding, the composition of the leadership that was elected. But I'm hopeful that he's not lost. I have seen that his name is being considered as well as part of the National Executive Committee. And I think given his age, he still has time. He has a lot to contribute to the organization.
I am winding down. I want you to talk to me about how do you explain to South Africans? Let's say you merge as Secretary General, and next to you is either Cyril Ramaphosa or even Zweli Mkhize. These are both tainted individuals as we speak. How do you then go back to society with these people as leaders, and explain that the ANC is still fit for purpose? That the ANC, which you said earlier, that it needs to unify itself, because I said you're killing the country, right? How do you explain that you are going to arrest whatever's happening and start focusing outward and on what the country needs, when you have leaders who are shrouded in conflict and corruption scandals, in essence? Or let me rephrase it. Who are followed by scandal.
Sure. My hope, I was going to come to that issue when, and I'm happy you've corrected yourself, that they are not necessarily, declared and confirmed to be corrupt. There are certain
allegations.
There are certain allegations that
an
are
allegation stand.
It's my hope that sooner than later, some of these allegations would be settled in one way or another. In a sense that whatever that needs to be dealt with by the court of law will be dealt with by the court of law. Whatever that may need to be, dealt with differently in whatever way that would help all of us in the ANC and South Africans to clarify, the involvement of these two leaders on the issues that we are talking about. My hope is that the sooner that happens, the better. And I do hope that if any of them is elected, remember it's not the two of them, only the two of them who are standing for president. But
please don't drag me into that thing, because I'm going to say the other two are, for me, are non-starters, but I don't want to be here. That's why I said for me. I'm not an ANC member. I just look at their campaigns and go, even Dr. Anyway, let me. I want to hold that back, particularly because these are women that I don't want to put a negative message about their campaigns.
Sure.
But I've been doing it for so long. I have said that I feel like their campaigns are non-starters, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay.
The truth of the matter is that there are two people leading the campaigns, one by a long mile, and the other he's there, Oksalayo, and anything can happen. Heck, even Paul Mashati, they could emerge president of the ANC. You can't trust the ANC. The question that I'm asking is just around how you navigate and how you communicate to society. So you're hoping that the institutions looking into whatever allegations
they will
exist.
have to conclude the matter, because without these matters being concluded, then you are quite correct. There may be people who are saying, as we get out of the conference and we want to chart a new path, who will say, but we are still contaminated by the past, where you come from. How are you going to deal with this? So my hope, my greatest hope, is that sooner than later these problems will somehow go away or be resolved in a way that it would be seen to be objective and acceptable to the population of our country.
And when the ANC leaves Nasrec on the 20th, what kind of ANC do you want to see walking away from?
Decisive, very focused, honest to the people of South Africa about our own challenges and about the challenges facing our people, capable to respond to the crisis of energy that we're facing today around Eskom. And you know what we're having now, which is problematic, is when even our comrades who are in government, who are ministers, are conveying different messages about the same issue. I really would want to see an ANC that emerges out of that conference that is truthful about our challenges and purposeful about how those challenges are going to be handled. Not these people who are going to be speaking in different tongues while they are meant to be dealing with one and the same matter. So that's the kind of the ANC that we need, which is a direction, a sense of purpose, and as I'm saying, very, very loyal and honest to the truth.
I was done. You just made me realize I want to find out one more thing. The tensions we've been hearing of between Gauteng and Kwazulu-Natal, with KwaZulu-Natal's leaders seemingly feeling betrayed by the nomination results that are coming out of Gauteng. What do you make of that?
I don't know. Look, I'm a member of the PEC. I saw some headlines where some of our regional secretaries are purported to have been participating in an interview expressing some discontent or concerns about the Gauteng and Comrade Tshidi. I don't know how factual is that. I'm hoping that when we have a PEC meeting, the leadership will then give us an information. At this stage, I mean, it will be difficult because nobody was heard talking. They are quoted, and people can say, no, I don't know
it's
that.
It's fine, you're trying to call us liars.
So,
it's
no,
okay.
not necessarily, but I'm saying someone might say,
might misquote you.
I never said it in the way that isn't put out. It's unlike now we're talking, people can hear my voice.
Your voice, yeah.
Exactly. So I'm yet to see whether what we've seen in the news over the past few days is really anything to go by, and the leadership will have to take us into confidence about what has brought about that kind of a situation and how it intends dealing with it, especially the top 5 of the province.
And if there is merit to some of the reports you've been seeing, what does that tell you?
I'll be very concerned if there's merit to it, because when we decided, I'm a member of the PEC. I don't have authority to speak on behalf of the PEC, but as a PEC member who sat in a meeting that decided on the perspective we think should be given as a guidance to structures on the ground when they are nominating, we never attach conditions. We only discuss what we think is best for the leadership of our country and the movement. There were no conditions that if you don't support this one, we will not support the other one. So I would be very worried if there are now conditions without the PEC having agreed and pronounced on the conditions in advance. Because if you take a decision and you set conditions, you've got to agree and you need to pronounce on those conditions.
All right. Mdumiseni Ntuli, Provincial Executive Committee member of the ANC in Kwazulu-Natal, a Secretary General hopeful of the ANC. Please, can I say, a difficult one to pin down. So Akaba SG, I'm going to struggle to get to Lutuli House. And also, he doesn't laugh. He barely laughs. I tried. He's laughing now. Thank you so much for your time, dude.
Thanks a lot, Tshidi.
That's it from us this week. Catch us again soon. This podcast was produced by Duduzile Masuku and Amu Ramela. For Eyewitness News, my name is Tshidi Madia.